Okay, this is Chris Kane, and we're here at our March FMPUG Tampa meeting, doing this online again. Tonight we're joined by Gilles Plante from Quebec City. Looks like we don't have a large attendance tonight, but that's fine. That just keeps things intimate. Tonight we're going to start off with a presentation that I'm getting ready to give next Monday at Pause on Error in Cleveland. Just kind of trotting this out and giving it a trial run. If at any time you want to interrupt, ask questions, you can type something in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask me directly. I look forward to your input and look forward to hopefully this becoming something of a discussion, because hope some of these ideas are at least a little bit new and perhaps even challenging, so that we have plenty to talk about. So I'm just going to start off like a salesperson reading my my PowerPoint, but don't let that put you off. Jump in anytime. So the title of this presentation is Extreme Abstraction, and I want to say a little something here about why I said extreme. I'm not trying to show off. I'm saying extreme because some of these methods might take abstraction further than you want to, and that's okay. We're not trying to sell you anything here. But in our business, because we're doing custom work and we end up with plenty of opportunity to reinvent the wheel, abstraction is really important to us so that we can hold what we've got, reuse what we've done before, and add more value to the client. So we might, I want a word of caution, we might be taking some of these concepts a little further than you're comfortable taking them, and that's fine. Another thing I want to make clear is that you are not going to come away, unfortunately, with some new widget that you can just go take and put in your solution. We are talking more about concepts and methods, although I'm going to give you some examples of those concepts and methods in use. So in that light, got the quote by Dogbert here that if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he'll buy an ugly hat. And if you talk about fish to a starving man, then you're a consultant. So just to be clear, I'm a consultant. So unfortunately, I am letting you know I want to set expectations. There's not a simple widget you can just take and use. We're talking more about methods and principles of overall development, and hopefully those you can take and use in your own development, developing your own widgets and scripts and layouts and so forth. A little bit about myself. We'll try and get through this quickly. FileMaker developer since version 2.1 back in the dark ages. FileMaker certified up through and including the current version. Founding partner of Extensitech, which has, this is kind of news, just become an FBA Platinum partner within the last month. So we're excited about that. We do exclusively custom development. We do not sell verticals. Or sell to verticals. We don't sell a FileMaker product. We sell our FileMaker FileMaker services so that we can develop custom solutions for our clients, primarily small business, medium-sized businesses, and departments of larger businesses. We've built over 100 solutions across nearly as many industries. Up until recently, we could say that we didn't have 2 customers in the same industry, but that has changed. But still, it's nearly as many industries as we have solutions. It's very custom, very much tailored to each individual customer's need. We have three certified developers, all of whom are attending here, myself, Jason Sanders, and Wayne Jackson. And between the 3 of us, we support more than 50 active solutions. And the reason I mention that is, again, not to brag, but to point out that that's a pretty high solution to developer ratio, and the only way we can do that is because of abstraction. because we can create things that can be used across multiple solutions and can be consistent across multiple solutions, it allows us to support more solutions with less developers. So that's why it's near and dear to our hearts. Okay, the inevitable definitions. What is abstraction? It is the quality of dealing with ideas rather than events. We're going to have some, I'm going to reference back to this when I show you some examples. But the idea is, rather than creating a lovingly handcrafted layout with some lovingly handcrafted scripts that do one thing for this particular event, it's building things that address the pattern that you see on that layout or with those scripts, the ideas behind them, so that things can be reused more readily. In another way of putting the same thing, but especially for the programmers among us, dealing with classes rather than instances. We're trying to build reusable tools that require minimal or no changes in order to reuse those tools. And when I say tools, that may be scripts, that may be layouts, it may be buttons, it may be any of those things. We're trying to build them in such a way that they can be reused with, if possible, no changes at all, but if they do require changes, keep it minimal and understandable. I also need to introduce the concept of wet versus dry development. And I have a little shout out here, a thank you to Jason Young, who brought up these terms in a presentation at last year's Pause on Error. WET stands for We Enjoy Typing. Or alternately, write everything twice. So that's the type of development where you're doing maybe even some hard coding. Everything's very segmented, not really a lot of portability. The alternative to that is dry, which is don't repeat yourself. And that's where we get into things that are very abstract, that you write once and basically they're black boxed. You don't write that same thing again, pretty much ever. And there is as Jason Young's presentation talked about last year, there is a balance between those things. Sometimes it's appropriate to be verbose. It's appropriate to be very specific. It's often even appropriate to hard code things. But where possible, we don't want to have to repeat ourselves. We want to make sure that when we write something really, really cool, it's also really, really portable so we can use it over and over. We advocate using dry methods for anything that changes infrequently but should change universally. So there are some things that change very often. The code itself, it needs to change a whole heck of a lot. Or it's something that if it does change, it should only change in this one little scope. For those, use wet methods, that's appropriate. But for anything that you can identify that this pattern repeats itself throughout the system and should repeat itself in exactly the same way throughout the system, we use dry. Our goals with abstraction, and I promise I'm going to get through these slides and get to some demo pretty quickly here. So, the goals of abstraction, obviously easier reuse with less typing, don't repeat yourself. A way to hold what you've got and not reinvent the wheel. I know in what I refer to as the bad old days of FileMaker development years ago when I was just getting started, it seemed like every single new solution I had to work up a contacts table and work up addresses and phone numbers and all those things over and over, always slightly differently, and slightly differently not in a good way just because it was done at a different time. This is our goal, is to hold what we've got and make sure that when we've got, for instance, contacts and addresses and so forth figured out, we at least can use that as a good starting point the next time around, and we don't have to start from scratch. Another goal of abstraction is to create single points that affect universal changes. story to go with that is that several years ago, Jason and I had a full-time employee whose sole job was to go through scripts changing XYZ to ABC. Full-time, day in, day out, going through scripts, going through layouts, just changing one or two things. We've moved, that person was kind of happy to find another job because that was a really awful job. And the reason we don't have somebody like that now is that we've changed our development such that we can make changes in less places that have more effect. And we do that through principles of abstraction. Another goal of abstraction, and this is really key and hard to see until you've done it a bit, is that you get to deal with nuances and details that would really be impractical or even impossible if you were doing solely wet development. If, for instance, you're writing a script, just a one-off script, and you want to print, obviously, well, I need to take care of the print setup. I need to decide whether there's going to be dialogue. I need to, determine whether I'm going to show a preview, those sorts of questions. But if you do that each and every time, you probably don't really think about every single detail of printing every single time. Whereas if you can use dry development, where you have a single print script that you're going to write once and reuse forever, you can get into all sorts of variations, such as how many pages do you want, and do I want page numbering or not, and do I want to create a PDF after I print, and things like that. Those sorts of nuances that would be impractical if you did it, if you had to think about that every single time you did a print. And finally, we want to create consistency for the user, not just the developer. We want to make sure that printing, for instance, or selecting records or navigating from layout to layout is consistent throughout the system. This obviously makes it easier for the developer. We've talked a lot about, don't repeat yourself and not writing everything twice. But what's less obvious is that that really creates a lot of consistency for the user, where they can have the same basic experience even if the details of any particular screen or action change. And a little side note about the importance of consistency. I believe it's a cornerstone of good development. It should be right up there with performance, security, data integrity, all the big things that we look for in creating good, usable solutions. I personally believe consistency should be right up there at the top level, because if a system is not consistent, it's generally not going to get used outside of a very, very, very narrow scope, and it's going to be difficult to add things to. And I would argue that consistency creates intuition. People talk about an intuitive solution. I think what they're really talking about is consistency, because consistency is what makes intuition possible. Consider, for instance, this icon. That is not intuitive to a younger generation. I mean, most of them haven't seen that disk before. It's only intuitive because it's consistent across multiple programs. Likewise, a paperclip. When people are looking at that, they see attachment now. They don't see, some coiled piece of metal for putting paper together. That has become intuitive because of the consistency of its use, not because of its original intent. These three buttons still puzzle me, but they are intuitive to a Mac user because they're consistent from screen to screen.
Is that a traffic light?
And finally, CC is my personal favorite. That stands for carbon copy. Just a fun little activity. Find somebody under about 25 or 30 and ask them if they've ever seen carbon paper. If you are older, this will make you feel even older than you are. They have no idea what CC means. it's CC because it's CC everywhere. Consistency has made that intuitive to the user. So getting to the point. Now we've talked about some definitions. We've talked about what we're trying to achieve. Let's talk about some foundational techniques. The first of these is do some idiomatic development. Use consistent patterns as you're developing. Try and recognize that I'm doing roughly the same thing 100 different times. Let's try and do it the same way all 100 times, or at least similarly. Naming convention, there's actually another presentation at Pause on Air regarding that, and I don't plan to go into this in too much depth, except to say if your goal is abstraction, it's going to be very useful to make your object names, your file names, your layout names, your table names, etc., not only meaningful to a human being, but consistent enough that you can parse them, that you can extract information from a table name, that you can extract information from a field name, and find out more about that object. That's also an opportunity to add meaning. One of the things we do is standard TLAs, or 3-letter abbreviations. You can, if you have consistency throughout your naming convention and throughout your methods of development, you can start creating your own reliable meanings that you can extract from your naming convention, such as standard 3-letter acronyms, what is a main layout, which one is the primary key without having to hard code it, and things of that nature. And another principle is copy more than you create. This is particularly true on layouts and layout objects. Try to avoid creating things from scratch. Have templates. Even if you don't have a template, copy something similar and then make any necessary modifications. That's going to increase your consistency, both as for the user and also as a developer. We've gotten to the point in FileMaker where one particular object, for instance a field, can have many, many, many attributes. You can have placeholder text, tooltips, hide when, styles, well, in 3 or 4 states. All of those things, if you're copying and tweaking, it's easy to keep that vast array of things consistent. If you're starting from scratch every time, chances are things are going to fall through the cracks. So as a principle, copy more than you create. Name all your objects in FileMaker, even though it's not required. You will end up needing to reference them as objects. So get in the habit of putting a name on all your objects, and that is helped very much by copy more than you create, because if you have a named object and you copy it, that object is also named. The whole name may include things like copy and so forth, but at least it starts with, the object name starts with the same thing, and you have some consistency that you can leverage later. Think a lot about scope. What does your code stick to? This has been really helpful to us as we've been trying to create things that are more consistent, that we can leverage, and things that can be abstracted, is thinking about, for example, what does a local variable versus a global variable stick to? I think we're all pretty familiar with that discussion. A local variable will stick to this particular script, whereas a global variable will stick to this user's session. It's interesting to think about, interesting and useful to think about other things that stick to different areas of the program, such as, for instance, menus, which stick to a window. Even though you define them at the layout, they stick to the window. Globals that stick to, of course, the field itself, but they stick to a user's session, as opposed to applying to the whole file as a whole, or applying to only one table or record like a normal field would. If you think about those things, it brings up new opportunities to create abstracted code that will stick to the right thing and be easy to copy. And finally, on this page, favor abstractable functions. There are some functions that are not abstractable. For instance, go to related record. Look for alternatives. Go to related record requires you every single time to pick the destination table occurrence and layout. However, if you have a script that does a find, you can accomplish the same thing, but the find, the fields you want to find in, the values you want to search for, the name of the layout, all of those things can be abstracted. So look for ways to avoid those few functions that are still completely can't be abstracted. My current goal, for instance, is to get around using the sort command because sort can't be abstracted. Of course, I still want to sort records, but we're looking for alternatives as to how we can make that so that we can specify the fields in the sort orders as parameters rather than having to create a new sort step every time we do a sort.
Chris, I think this
Yes.
slide is very interesting, and your second point about naming convention.
Yes.
My nightmare at this time, and I think I'm not the only one, which way you should go. The thing is, to properly develop, I think this is the first thing anyone should do. Create its naming convention, and the patterns you talked about maybe 2 or 3 slides ago, but every time I start something, that naming convention changes as I program because, well, maybe that's not so good. It's
Right.
you take a decision on which one you're going to use, but when it's done, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. It's the first thing that we should do, and it's generally the last thing that we actually do because it's so
Yeah.
boring. But well, boring for most people. I'm a geek. I like it. So.
And I'm looking forward on how you're going to implement classes in FileMaker.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
here, let me. Well, the
yeah.
classes may be leading you in another direction. I do mean that in the most general of terms. But let me open our solution here. And actually, I had these open earlier, and my computer helpfully closed. I'm gonna take a little tangent here and point you to just a general idea of how we do our naming convention, and also point you to a blog that we have that gives more details. Not because I think well, of course I think our naming convention is the best, but everybody does, right? But hopefully it would give you some ideas. Let's see. I'm running low on bandwidth here. While that's opening, let me look for the blog that I can give you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is actually, naming convention could be a topic in and of itself.
Mhm.
As you can see, this is not a short blog.
No.
Uh, but what it does is not just tell you about our naming convention, actually our old one and our new one, because this was written when we were working on a new version of our base and we were switching naming conventions. So this talks about the naming convention we were using prior to a few years ago and how we came up with it. Um, and also the naming convention that we ended up with after that. And it talks about what it is we're trying to accomplish with the naming convention. So even if you read this and you decide, well, I don't like their naming convention, which is fine. I don't like other people's naming conventions either. But you can, uh, it should help you think about what are the important parts of my names? What are the important parts of the names of things that I need to make sure are in there in some form, right? For example, for fields, right, we're trying to identify, we need to identify keys of it. Whoops, I'm scrolling like crazy. I'm sorry. We need to identify keys, of course. Um, we need to identify, oh, that's our old naming convention. And I'm sorry, I am missing the objectives section. Ah, here we go. It's all in this paragraph. Um, so the objectives we identified were name spacing, trying to make sure that similar fields end up next to each other in alphabetical order. That's one goal. The purpose of the field, is it a key field? Is it just something that's needed for a layout? Is it a Boolean, like yes, no, on, off, 1, 0? And then the third objective is what type of field is it? We need to be able to tell that because in a lot of places you can't see that in FileMaker. And then, of course, you want it to be consistent,
Yeah.
just as a goal. So let me put this in the chat.
Yeah.
And you'll end up seeing our naming convention as I get into individual examples, and I'll try and speak to them as we pass things by, but I want to make sure you have that so that if you want to dive deep and find out more, and it sounds like you're very interested in that topic, I want to
Yeah.
make sure that you can.
You can be sure I'm gonna look at this one.
All right, great. Looks like Eric Miller just joined us. We know Eric from DocuWorks. I don't know if he's just muted himself or if he hasn't come on audio yet. He says hi, everyone. Eric, we got a pretty small group today, so we're pretty much unmute at will. Don't be afraid to say hi or jump in at any time.
Sure. Hi guys. Yeah, I was in a couple different meetings. I wanted to join in earlier, so I'm just glad to catch the.
Yeah, no problem. I'm still pretty much in the boring PowerPoint section of my presentation, so you haven't missed anything really.
All right.
So with that all said, Gilles, I think, like I said, I think I'll touch on these things as we're going through, as we start looking at examples. I'll point out specific naming conventions and do a bit of a callback to this point and show you that in action. But like I said, you have that blog, so if you want to look deeper into what we've come up with, and by all means, I mean, comment, shoot us an email, tell us what we missed. That's how we find out.
Fine. Thanks.
So let me see if I can remember how to start from the current slide. I should know that. From current slide, it's Shift F5. I'll remember that someday. Okay, so yeah, okay. We'll also publish this slideshow too, if that's of use to you there, Gilles. All right. There are different levels of abstraction, also important. In everything we try and put some bit of abstraction. with varying levels of success. And of course, I would like everything to be so abstracted that I don't even have to work for a living. But there's definitely layers. So, the first level is unabstracted. You just have this lovingly handcrafted layout or button or script that works great, but it only works here and it only works now. It's not real portable. Sometimes those are fine, and sometimes those are great because they can do something faster or something very, very specific. But it's not really abstracted in that case. We have the copy and tweak method, which is we've got something that's pretty easy to copy, but lots of stuff needs to be changed after you copy it. You have to go through and change a lot of fields, change a lot of object names, change a lot of maybe table occurrences in a script. Still, at least you started off with a copy and you didn't have to start from scratch. Right? So that's down the path a ways. Then we have just copy and paste, which is kind of on a par with this, but it's copy and paste. I don't have to tweak it, but God help me if something changes, because I've got to go fix it in 100 different places, because now it's all independent copies. And then there's a level of abstraction we're trying to get to, which is copy and paste, but also make sure that any changes can be made in single locations, so that I can change one custom function or change one script and affect all the various copies that I've made of this thing. So, finally, we're on to examples and demo. I will tell you that from going through this, I will probably trim down these slides before pause on error. So, let's show some examples. I was going to start with just a brief example of XSpace, since most of the people have seen it. We do have video blogs on YouTube if you wanted to see some details. But overall, admittedly, XSpace is at the copy and tweak level. We have a base solution that includes contact management, activity management, document management, and administration. And we use that as the starting point for every one of our custom solutions. So in effect, we're copying it, and then we're making tweaks. Now, we don't end up changing a lot of the base code for customization. In fact, ideally, we don't make any changes to the base itself, but we do build on top of it. This is the solution that we have showing here. This is actually our internal solution, which is based on XSpace. And it has, for instance, a way to navigate around the system. It has a general look and feel. Here's our contact screen. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but most of what you see here is included in our base solution. It's just kind of a starting point that has all our conventions already in place so that we can build more quickly. It is the basis for dozens of solutions. The core functionality is dry. We don't repeat ourselves, but we can create wet or maybe damp customizations where we can add new tables, add new screens, and so forth, while keeping the core conventions and scripting and so forth reusable. And drawing that line is key. Drawing the line as to what should be in the base and what should be customized. And it's that balance between dry and wet that we were talking about. As I said, it includes administration. It includes things like navigation around the system. It has contacts. It has activities. Those are things that we can be sure we're going to be reusing in pretty much every project. But it's notable that XSpace does not include customers, does not include invoices, does not include stock, because those depend on what industry you're in. We have many clients that don't have customers. They have constituents. They have members, things of that nature. So we don't want to build too much into the base, but what we do as far as, tables like contacts and activities. But what we do want to bake into it is those conventions and reusable items. So first, real demonstration of something that's abstract, and I apologize to all the people in the room who have seen this 100 times because I brag about it a lot, but we have Xscript. And remember, when we're trying to abstract, we're dealing with ideas rather than events. And the way that comes through in Xscript is, if we look at our scripts list, we don't generally have, a script, a bunch of scripts for invoices and a bunch of scripts for contacts and a bunch of scripts for addresses, et cetera, et cetera. We're dealing, rather than dealing with the specific table or that one specific layout or that specific use, we're dealing with the ideas that we keep reusing. Things like, I've mentioned this before, printing, selecting records from another table, updating fields, doing things to windows like resizing a window, hiding a window, refreshing a window, etc. Duplicating a record, deleting a portal row. So we've got these broken down into the individual concepts, the individual steps you would go through to do pretty much anything on any screen. And Xscript allows us to run these subroutines in a particular order. So I can pass parameters to Xscript to tell it, find some records, sort the records, and then print the records, for example. And it's all controlled through parameters. Is this Gilles, I know this is probably the first time you've seen this. Does that basic concept make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay. Get back to here. Also, creating single points to affect universal changes. Again, this is an example of that, where if I want, if I did end up with a client that said, every time the user prints, I want it to beep, or every time the user prints, I want it to show a dialog that says, "Are you sure you want to kill a tree?" Right? I could add it to this script, and it affects every print job that happens throughout the system. I don't have to go through each and every script looking for the print step. So probably the simplest example of single point of change. But that's true of any of these others. If I wanted to change the way sorting behaved, if I wanted to change the way selecting behaved, I don't have to go around to every single place that we're selecting a record from another table, or go around to every single place that we need to do a sort, or every single place that we need to update fields. I can do it in one place and affect all the coding throughout the system because they're all running through these scripts. That's that single point that we've been talking about. So the idea being that processes are unique, but there are and should be patterns in the functions. Your process of going to a related record or printing a particular report, of course that's unique. It should be unique. That should be, if you will, wet. But the various functions that happen in the course of doing that, such as finding the records, sorting the records, printing the records, selecting records, there are patterns there, and that's an opportunity to do dry development. It's in much the same way that each script is unique, but you expect each step to perform the same way from script to script. And reiterating, dry scripts, wet parameters. So let me give you an example of this actually working. I wanted to write, I'll just do this. Temp. This is our own file, so of course there's a million temps in here. We can't help ourselves. Temp tester. That's awesome. There are not a million temp files in here. Somebody did help themselves. That's awesome. So I'm going to create a new script, and all this script is going to do is run perform script, X script. And we use multi-parameter method, very similar to something that Six Fried Rice put out some years ago. It's just I didn't know it existed when I came up with this. So this is my custom function for the X tag. And then I can name the thing I'm trying to run. So for instance, I'm going to find. And that's telling it which script to call these back here. They start with a 3-letter acronym, and you can see how the naming convention is helping us there. I'm saying, basically, if I want to know what FND does, I look for the script that starts with FND. There's some meaning involved there. And then I can pass it various parameters, such as, also in Xtag, such as the table I want to find in is contacts. The field I want to find in is, and I need a field name here, I'll use, let's say, name person name first, and the value I want to find is, I'll look for, we're going to pick on Jason. I want to find any Jason in contacts. And then, when I'm done running that find, I'm going to say I want to show a dialog, and the message is an expression I found and get. Did we just lose somebody or gain somebody?
No, I had to move my operation mobile, so I'm now on my phone. So I
Okay.
had to get in the car. So.
All right. And then I find where I can hit the wrong button there. Okay. And close that out. All right. So are you still with me? Does this can you follow the pattern here, Gilles, as far as what I'm trying to do?
What is that first function is doing?
So really, there's only one. The FileMaker function here is a custom function, which we call Xtag. But what it does is it says, give me this as basically an XML tag, and put all this inside it. Okay. This will help. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it in a data viewer. And show you what the result is. Okay.
Oh.
So actually, I'll put it up here where you can actually read it. So this equals this. So you see, it's basically creating XML style tags. And we do that with a custom function just because it's, well, number one, a lot easier to type. And there is some recursion involved as far as nesting these things. But the big advantage of using a function here is you notice how when I tried to get out, it told me I was missing quotation marks or I was missing a field and that sort of thing. If I just did this in quotation marks, I wouldn't get any help from FileMaker. So,
Yeah.
But it's a way of us passing multiple parameters to a script. We actually use it in some cases. We've gone so far as to use xtag to pass multiple parameters to custom functions or calculations. But it allows us to put things really in any order. You know, if we add parameters to something later, you know, we don't have to get them in exactly the right order. So sometimes the order matters. I mean, obviously I want to do the find before I do the dialogue. But if I'm passing in this, it's really the same. If I pass the value before the field, that's okay because my script is going to be looking for the first val tag, the first field tag, etc. Does that make sense? As opposed to passing things in order and doing an ordered list. What do you do now for passing multiple parameters to a script, or do you?
You can use, for example, lists, or I haven't went into that very often. But what we're looking at, is it a scripted script? For example,
It is.
Called the find, or will generate a find, and die will generate a custom dialog, and
That's correct. So this will tell xscript first run the find script with these parameters, then run the dialog script with this parameter.
so it's going to interpret this and then call the appropriate functions or script. Oh.
That's correct.
Oh.
So here, let's see it once at speed and make sure that I didn't mistype it. Okay. Let's see. So my aptly named new script, we'll tell it to run. I found 9 records, and here they are. Here's our 9 JSONs. Okay. Now, if I could run this through with debugger, okay, I'm going to perform xscript. That's the main script. And first I gather up the parameter, just because I get tired of typing get script parameter over and over again, right? And at the top of each of our scripts, including the main script, we gather up parameters. And we're using something called xtag node. That's a custom function that just says basically go find the open bracket, find out what the first tag is, and find out where that ends, and give me the stuff in between.
Parses the things.
Yeah, it's basically just parsing. So xscript itself has some what we call switches, right? Xscript itself, the kind of master script, has its own behavior. In the version of the base that we're working on now, by default it opens up a new window, a new processing window, so it could do all its work there. By default, when it's done, it's going to rerun any on-record load. By default, it's going to commit before it runs to make sure all the data is saved, but I can override any of those things. So what's important is that each of these parameters, almost all of these parameters, wherever humanly possible, has a default. So if I don't specify, it'll do something consistent, right? But so these are the switches, none of which I've set in my example, right? So it's just going to do the default. It's going to spawn a new window. It's it's not on the server. It's not going to behave as if it's on the server. It's not going to perform in the current window. It's not going to run if I'm in find mode. Those are all generally expected behaviors, any of which I can override. Okay. So this will run down until it finds, I'm going to just run to break. Here it is spawning a new processing window. I'll run to break again. This is a very long script, so I'm not going to step through it one at a time.
Yeah.
But we get down to where the next node is FMD. Therefore, I'm going to perform the script find with the stuff that's in that node. Okay? So we step in, and at the top of this script, we're also parsing out the parameters, right? Saying, what have I said specifically about this find? What should be the name of the window when I'm done with the find? What layout should I perform the find on? What table am I going to go to? Should I show errors if nothing is found? Should I show dialogues at all? I can shut those off. Should I pause for the user to add their own criteria? You can see this is an example of where we've been able to put all sorts of nuances and details into this script that include things that really a lot of times you don't have time to think about. If you're just handcrafting one script, you just say find, and just assume everything's fine, and generally it is. But this allows us to really get down into the nitty-gritty and really explore the idea of finding. What are all the things that we might want to modify? What are all the things that we want to error trap for and things like that? We can get very, very detailed because this script almost never gets edited. It just gets called with parameters. So once you put in the hard work to write it the first time, you can pretty much go, well, finding just works, and I've already taken into account all those considerations. So this is going through and setting the fields I've specified to the values that I've specified, making sure we're on the right layout. It's actually defaulting the layout based on the table, right? Because I didn't specify what layout, but I did specify I wanted it in the context table, so it's saying what's the main layout for contacts because he didn't specify, right? But I mean this will handle a lot. I mean, I can do constraints with this. I can do extends with this. I can do multiple level, multiple request finds. I can do filtered finds where I can apply a filter overall and say, no matter what they search for, they can't find unless this is true. So we've taken this kind of to the nth degree. So anyway, I'm going to step out of this if that's okay. And
how much time did it take the company to put that together?
a long, long time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was not easy. But it did start considerably shorter than this. For a long time, it was whenever we needed to use this routine, we'd remember something else that we wanted to handle. But then we'd build it into this routine, and once it's built into this routine,
yeah,
it's there for next time.
So about 10 years.
Jason's over here saying 10 years, which I suppose in some way is literally true, because like the first version of this is over 10 years, 10 years old. But it still has some of the stuff we did 10 years ago is still applicable. We're still handling the same sorts of things.
Very impressive.
Right. So it keeps that central point. And again, I'm not trying to sell you on, our version of XScript, but it keeps that central point you can make changes. It allows you to pay attention to really arcane details that it wouldn't be practical to do every time you did a find. To stop and think about, do I want to filter this? Do I want to do this in a new window? Do I want to always go to this layout or go to thinking about that each and every time Generally speaking, if you're writing one-off scripts, you're probably going to end up in a find hitting 5 or 6 lines of code. And that's not to say that they won't do the trick this one particular time. But you're definitely not hitting the full wealth of things you could do with a find. You see. All right. So I'm going to step out of here and just show how. Okay. Now I'm really, really going to step out of here. I just had some stops in there. Sorry. So I get back to Xscript and it says, well, what's next? Next is my dialog. So it steps in and does a dialog. There we go. Step over. So I'll just run this out, and this handles things like, multiple fields, specifying labels for fields, specifying what fields should show, specifying button names, all of that good stuff. And I get my dialog. And then at the end of Xscript, we just wind up. So really, there's 3 types of nodes in Xscript that you can call. One is the switches I talked about. One is the actual functions like find and dialog that we just saw. And then the other one, which we didn't see, are controls. I can do conditional and a for loop. All by passing a set of parameters. So we don't actually write a lot of new scripts. We write some god-awful parameters. I mean, very long parameters that are, go find and then conditionally do this and that and then show a dialogue, and depending on what the dialogue was, find something else, So our parameters tend to be very long, but by running them through the same scripts every time, we can guarantee that consistency. We can set up that single point that we can make functional changes throughout the system.
You kind of develop your own script engine.
Almost. It's like the Xscript nodes are like script step groups, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's all in an effort to make that stuff reusable. Yeah. Okay. So I do have another couple of examples. Do you have any questions, more questions specifically about Xscript?
No, not at this moment.
Obviously, I mean that's a large topic. If you were just interested in Xscript itself, what I want to focus on in this presentation, though, is just how you can apply those principles. How you can apply those principles and get things to that single point that you can make universal changes, and also where you can reuse your code really extensively to make it consistent. Okay. So, next example. We have something called Xlink, which everything you see from this point forward leverages Xscript, so we kind of had to hit that first. Xlink is about selecting records, and again, deal with nuances and details that would be impractical with wet development. The scenario is we want to allow the user to select one or more records. That happens in every solution, right? If you're not doing that, it makes me wonder whether you have a relational database or just a flat file, right? Sooner or later, I have to select, who's the customer on this invoice, or, who does this address belong to, or, which address do I want to use for mailing, et cetera, et cetera. That's a common thing that we need the user to do. We need the user to select a related record. Follow? The pattern sound familiar? Oof, I think you muted. Okay. So obvious question here, why not just do a value list, which is what everybody does starting out and what some people do going on. I'm not saying it's a terrible thing, but I'll tell you why we're not using a value list. First off, we really want to prevent duplicates, so that's part of what this routine does. We want to make sure that if there is an existing record, the user finds it and uses it rather than creating a new one. So that takes a little massaging of the interface. So we want to make them check, but also make it convenient for them to check first. We want to deal with duplicates that already exist. John Smith is considered a common name for a reason. There are a lot of them. It's not unreasonable to have 2 John Smiths in your database. So what do you do when the user says, well, I want to select John Smith? We need to ask them which John Smith and give them enough information to make that decision for us. And then also, if they've picked something, or not picked something, they've typed something in and it doesn't exist, we want to help them create the necessary related record. So here's what this looks like. And probably the easiest way for me to show this to you is I'm going to go to addresses. Kind of using a backdoor here just because my easiest example that isn't also rolled into a custom function or something like that is this one. So let's create a new address, and we're going to say this is 123 Elm Street in, we'll do good old Quebec City in, okay, it really wants me to select the contact first. That's what I get for trying to be fancy. It's not going to let me pick the country until I pick a contact. So let's put in, you see how I'm getting a value list of all the contacts in the system? So all right, I'm going to put in Jill. Now when I tab off, it'll ask me no match was found in contacts. Do you want to create a new record, pick another record, or reset this to blank? I'll say I want a new record. The system's going to guide me through creating a new contact record. Actually, first it's going to bring up PowerPoint in front, which is really annoying. Okay. All right. Comes up with a new contact. I need to decide if this is a person or a company, because I can't tell. Right? I say person. System puts this away. It actually puts the first word in here and the last word in here, kind of helping me out. And I can just click OK. So what you're seeing working here is Xlink. Right? I can pick an existing record, like let's say Chris Kane. I can realize that I don't have any duplicates in my database. Let me see. No, I really don't. Jason, behind the scenes, can you do me a favor and create two John Smiths for me? Okay. I didn't have that demo as prepped as I wanted here. Select the contact. Okay, we're going to make it Gilles. Okay. And I can pick a country, for instance, Canada. And that's Xlink. I can pick a state or province and find PQ. That's an Xlink. And then I can put in, well, no, I really can't because I have no idea how these postal codes work in Canada, but I'll try and make it look good. Oh, I'm looking for a score there, Gilles. Did I get anywhere near what your postal codes look like?
It's what's my postal code?
Well, I got letters in there, right? We just have 5 numbers. It seems a lot easier.
Yeah, that looks like a Canadian postal code.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Well, that's sheer luck. Sheer luck. Okay. So this is an X-link, this is an X-link, and this is an X-link, and they all behave the same way, right? And if I go into layout mode, I'm going to show you how I can set one of those up. Now you can see that it's handling a lot of things, right? It's handling showing you the existing ones and helping you find the one that you already know about. You know, somebody that's already in the system, so you don't create a duplicate. It's helping you if you put in a value that's not there. It's helping you to create new. Also, you notice this first option is select. Let's say I'm not exactly sure what the person's name is. I can say select, and it'll say, do you have any criteria? I can say, well, I think there's an AS in his name. And here's all the records with an AS. I can even do a find, you know, and I can search by phone number, I can search by email address, I could search by their middle name, whatever. Like I know I know that it's a person, and I know it's a male. And I finally get down to here. Oh, here's the guy I was looking for. So there's Jason. And I click OK, and it selects him. So, you know, that's a lot of details going into that. I think you'd agree. That's a lot more than just a drop-down list. But here's how I would set one up. Let's suppose that for some reason I wanted addresses linked to, let's say we're going to assign it to an employee, right? I want this record linked to an employee record. Okay? Bizarre scenario, but they're always bizarre when you hear about them the first time. Okay? Here are the steps I would have to go through. I would go into define database. I would wait ever so patiently for define database to come up. Where'd it go? There it is. I would just define my foreign keys. I'd say I need an emp, and that's part of our naming convention. And I'm also going to need kind of a helper field here for the X-link, which we'll call empx, and that's the field that the user is actually typing in, that we use temporarily to get the real key. Okay, so I define emp and empx. I'll go over here to the relationship graph and find the tog I'm working in, and I create two relationships. Actually, in some stuff I'm working on now, I've got it down to one relationship, but this is the way we do it now. So I create add emp, right? So from addresses show me employees, and I need another one that is add emp x, just like the field, so nice and consistent. We link the real key to the primary key, and we take the helper field and link it to our description field. Okay. So I've created two fields, two relationships. We tell this OK. And we wait. Now I go into layout mode. Remember I said copy more than you add? I'm going to copy this, or actually I'm just going to duplicate this, move it over here. As I said, I am working on some development that has this down to even less steps, but for now, I would change the label here. This has, I'm using a custom function so that I can, you know, everything's the same except this key right here. Conditional format, again, everything's the same except this key here. Repoint some fields. This should be coming from kind of obviously add amp description. And I've got this little thing just indicates there's something back here. So I don't forget. This gets changed to my new helper field. The value list, which we pre-established for every table. It's just a value list of the primary description. I notice that I don't have to change these scripts. Those are running the same. No customized parameters. And go to browse mode. There's no primary description on employees. I just used a very bad example. Jill, will you forgive me? Everybody over here is laughing at me.
No problem.
Okay, we're going to make this something that the problem is that employees don't have a stored primary description, because really the only way to describe an employee is by the contact name. So I just made a bad choice. So I'm going to pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And I will change these to use accounts, which is a better example. And boy, am I glad I tried this out here before I do it next week. And same thing, that equals description. That's probably already set up right anyway. That equals ID, good. By the way, in our naming convention, one of the things we do is all our primary keys are called __ ID. It doesn't matter what table they're in. Makes it easier for us to programmatically address it. I found that's fairly uncommon. I don't know. What do you do for primary keys? Or, well, you did mention you were kind of in flux about your naming convention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
really.
Chris, I can say that my staff wished that we did that.
Yeah. Well, I remember, you know, I'm sympathetic though. I remember when you first saw it, I was like, that can't work, you know. And you know, I went for a long time having a different name for the primary key in every table. And I don't know, it seemed right, but
Yeah, I mean, it definitely simplifies certain operations, especially when, like us, you have 274 tables, and you're trying to link them and stuff, so it gets a little heavy. But no, yeah, that's definitely some good advice, and they also like some of the other things that you're doing with your naming conventions and stuff too. So.
oh well, thank you. I know you have an awful lot going on too. I mean, as I keep saying, not trying to make everybody work the way we do, but thank you. And Gilles, I know you haven't met Eric or DocuWorks if this is your first time attending, but he has a good-sized company down here in Tampa with a vertical solution that is pretty amazing. You've actually missed a demo of it. For one thing, it's beautiful to look at, which I don't get a lot of on my own solutions. So I'm sorry. I'm getting back to the part where I screwed up. I'm almost there. And that's the one thing I forgot. This has to be a value list of accounts. Okay, so remember our scenario. I'm going to assign this to a user account as opposed to an employee. Like I said, just a bad choice of which table I happen to pick. This works with almost all tables, and of course I picked like one of the, I think, 3 that I can't get a value list on. But now, we're back to the nothing up my sleeve portion of the show. Here are our user accounts, and I can pick one. If I'm not sure, maybe I only know the person's full name, like for instance, C. Smith is Crystal, right? Maybe I can't tell, is that Crystal Kane or Crystal Smith? I'm not real sure. I can say select, and it asks me who I'm looking for. I'm looking for Crystal. Found it in one, so it says only one record was found. Was this who you wanted? Yes. And there we are. Okay. So that script, pretty complex, and please don't ask me the question about how long it took, because I might have like trauma, I might have like traumatic memories. This was very difficult to do. Don't get me wrong, but once it's done, I can reuse this forever, and it is awesome. And this takes very few parameters, but are required, but many that can be overridden. So it's very flexible, but at the same time provides a consistency throughout our solution for any time you pick a record, you know it's going to look roughly like this. And you're going to have those tools to help you identify duplicates, help you identify if the record already exists, create the record if it doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Any questions on that?
Nope.
All right. All right. If there's anything else you want to see in there, I mean, I'll dive deeper if you want. But like I said, the principle I'm trying to demonstrate is that it's worth working really hard on that one thing if you can reuse it. You know, it lets you do some pretty special things. That if you decided how to select records or how to link up records every single time, you'd never get that level of detail. It just wouldn't be practical. If I had to write this whole thing, you know, even once a year, I would not do it. Right? But once it's written, once you have that single point, that single function that you can reuse, it's really powerful. So ready for another example?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The select button. Ooh my. Okay, now we start getting into some actual. I'll tell you what. In the interest of time, and because I want to and priority, I'm going to get the next one first, and if we have time, we'll come back to this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This one is hot off the press. Okay.
Oh.
And demonstrates some different. Some of those other principles that we've been talking about. So this is called a universal drill down button. Full disclosure, I do not have this in any live solutions yet. Okay. But, well, it would be nice if I would have been logging in the background like I thought I was, but we're going into, this is called Matrix. This is something we're working on as our next base solution. Eric is tired of hearing of it. We've been working on this for well over a year. It's still got a long ways to go, but there's some very cool things in there that I will do my best not to talk your ear off about.
Hey Chris, this is Eric. One year really isn't all that long in the scheme of things. So
well, that's true. Yeah, not for you. Yeah, because you built that monstrous vertical solution, and I'm sure
we're still building. It's kind of like it's like never really ends. But hey, great seminar so far here. I have to sign off. I just wanted to say, you know, I'm learning stuff, even though I'm just listening. I can't see a screen, but just listening to you go through this stuff is always great. So thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and you know, I welcome your input. If you think of anything I could you know, do better, I'm going to be live without a net come Monday. So
All right. Yeah, I definitely look
If you
forward
have
to hearing
any,
how that all goes.
suggestions, they're really welcome. I always appreciate your input, Eric.
All right.
Meanwhile, have a good one. Thank you for
All
joining
right.
us.
All right, sir. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay. So this is that, like I said, new base I was talking about. We're working on translations. It's one of the things we're trying to bake into our new base solution is internationalization, so that you could, for instance, have all your labels be in French, for example. So this is the table where we keep our translations. Now, I'm not going to try and talk about translations because that's a whole presentation by itself. But on this screen, we have drill down buttons, right? So click here to go to the related record. Pretty common need, I think you'd agree. They show up everywhere, right? Usually you end up with a magnifying glass or something. We've gone with a chevron, just keeping a nice thin look. What's interesting about these buttons is that they all run the same script with no parameters. Okay. They all use a tooltip with no parameters. Yeah. They all have a hide win that has no parameters. So go into layout mode and take a look at this. This is actually a field. The one thing that's different from between this one and this one and this one, they are all a field just called utility global. It's a global field that we never actually type in, believe it or not. And this comes from the target table. Okay, so this one comes from the translation language. This one comes from the other translation of the same phrases language. And this one comes from the other translation of the same phrase. Okay? Making sense so far? You see that that's the only thing that's changed is where it's from. It has a tooltip which uses a custom function that just calls self, so I don't have to change that if I duplicate it. That's determining that if there is no related record, don't show me the drill down button. It has a tooltip that also calls self, and that figures out what the full human readable name is of the target table. Figures out what the value, what the description is of the related record, and ends up showing you something that says, for instance, click here to view, this language in this table, or this value in this table. And it runs a script on enter with the parameter that is a custom function with no parameters of its own. Okay. So if I click here, I should go to languages with English, and I do. I don't have my back and forward navigation working at the moment, so pay no attention as I go back to where I was. If I go here, I should go to Albanian. And I would pick one with a nice long list to search for. I'm going to work on which examples I pick. I'm like picking the absolute worst examples every time.
Set the bar low.
Like it's my job. Oh, goodness, come on. It will get there, though. Okay, here's what I want to point out. I landed on Albanian, but notice I'm on the second record of 60. So it found all the records in the portal, but took me to the correct one that I was clicking on. all without me doing anything special in the, in the script trigger or the field or anything like that. Back to translations, and this one would take me to all these phrases that mean entity type in English. I'll try it. Hopefully this one's faster than the last one. Yeah, I drilled down on English. That's not real exciting. I'm going to end up back here, right? Let me go to... I really don't know. I didn't ask. You speak French as well?
Yeah, I do.
I assume with Quebec City, but I didn't ask. I can really torture French. Can't speak.
Yeah.
I can make you wish that I didn't try. Does that count? Anyway, okay, so it works. Now, to demonstrate, remember all the steps I had to go through for Xlink? Not a whole lot, but probably 6 or 7 steps. Let's suppose that I deleted this, made a copy, and all I have to do is tell it I want to come from this table occurrence, still the utility global, put it where I want it. And I can duplicate this and say I want this to come from here, still the utility global, and that's done. So I'm really excited about this concept and really excited about, I'm excited about this particular widget, but ever since we accomplished that, I'm looking for more. So let me tell you some of the things that it's doing and some of the, whoops, I'm going to wiggle it. I have to wiggle this so it fits on the portal row. No, I really want it on the portal row. How hard do I have to wiggle this thing? Is that really still not on the portal? Do you have this problem too, Jess? Trying to get stuff on portal rows?
Well, portal are sometimes very tricky, right?
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't want to stick, you know?
It's gonna be too high there.
Do you think so? Top edge is at 345, top edge is at 345. 345. Let's try one more time. Did I make it? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes FileMaker just doesn't want to believe that you want it in that portal. So, anyway. Normally, for a drill down button, you just go to related. Am I right? But as I mentioned, go to related can't be abstracted. A find can be. In other words, I can pass parameters to a find. And you saw that we have that find script. So this is essentially doing a find in the other table. Okay, whether that be a multi-level find or whatnot. What's cool about this is it's actually parsing the relationship to determine what to find. So not only is the find abstracted, but the fields and values of that find request are abstracted. It looks at the name of the field that you've just clicked into and its table and figures out everything else. Is this making any sense to you? So by way of example, relation info for, let's say, tra-tra phrase. This is this one right here. It's where this one's coming from anyway. Oh, okay, I only went out for a moment. That will bring back all the relationships to that table. My custom function says, all right, I'm on tra translations. So of these relationships, find the one that's for tra translations. So it finds this, does a little gymnastics to figure out this is the block we want. So now we're ignoring this. Okay? And then creating the find request, aside from some nuances that give me a headache, is basically for this field in the target table, take the value from here and create a find request. So that if I look at the function x script par drill down and x drill field button drill down, right? Problem with this is it works off the field that you're currently in. So give me a moment to fake this out, get in the field where we end up kicking off that script. But here's the find request. So it says go to the object named tab start body. That's just to make sure it actually goes to a common object on our layouts, just to make sure we don't have like an uncommitted record, or we're not still editing this row. Do not exit if there's an error, because that's not a critical thing. Do a find all records, even if they're this just means even if they're inactive. This is the key I want to land on. Do I want to land on the form or the list? I get the key a second time, which is interesting. And then I want an expression which is a list of all the records, so I can search for that. Follow? So it's translating this into that. If it can't do that, and sometimes it can't, if it's like several tables away, it will actually just do a multi-line find for all the keys that it needs to find. So it has kind of a fallback. Let me try something here. I'm going to kill this. Tools. No. What am I doing right now? Oh, portal exit. Tools, debug. Actually figuring out which will be a better example for next time. I hope you'll forgive me. Yeah, this is actually about. It turns out that one for the translations, because it's more than one table away, it's unable to parse. So that one was just looking for keys, which isn't that exciting. This one is better. So if I'm looking for LAN, okay, that gives me this relationship info, which we figure out is this block, and then the button drill down says make sure you're out of the portal. That's the object thing. Do a find. I don't care whether they're active or not. This is the key I want to land on. This is the view I want to land on. That's new in Matrix, form versus list. And I want one request where the field ID is set to the value this language, end request, and find. So I am newly glad that I don't have to type this every time I do a drill down button, because that's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
But it will figure it all out just by the location of the utility field. All right. So
It's been a lot of work to develop it. Now it's paying off. Ooh.
yeah, now I just drag and drop, change one thing, and away we go. That's the important part. All right. I was going to demonstrate one other thing. I think we're about out of time, but I won't demonstrate the full thing, but I will say that I've this had to do with the object names, and ta-da! I can't change this here. Let me go to, remember we were looking at addresses, picking a contact. There's a button here for selecting. We're moving select out of the value list and over to here. That button works by identifying what is the nearest field to the left of this object.
Oh boy.
So it actually parses the list of objects on the layout and their boundaries and figures out which one's to the left. So now those are all, I like to think they're really cool, but they're, the point is the way you develop. I mean, the point is to look for those places of your own where you can find central places to control a lot of functionality and keep it consistent. Reuse your really cool code, write it such that it's not only useful in one place, find ways to leverage it. So it's the general idea.
Yeah, sometimes I tell people that the only limitation with FileMaker is your imagination. I think you just proved that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, imagination and as you've rightly pointed out, sometimes a lot of work.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
And these are extreme. I mean, calling back to that, these are extreme. I mean, it's not worth it for everybody.
Extraction.
It's worth it for us.
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of value out of this. We get to support way more solutions than we could otherwise. We get to build a lot more solutions a lot faster than we otherwise would have, because everything's all custom. And if we didn't do stuff like this, we'd be building every single solution from scratch and supporting it as a one-off. This really saves our lives. It's really important to us, and we hope it will give you and others, new ideas.
It cuts the time for development. It helps in helping people, in giving support, because it's always the same thing. So wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I know this ran a little long. We had left some time for discussion. I think we've gotten to discuss as we went through, which I really enjoyed, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. By all means, questions, comments, welcome now. You're always welcome to reach out to me personally if you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear, especially if you come out with some ideas about this, I'd love to hear what you do with them. Also love to hear new ideas from you. I hope you'll join us going forward. We meet once a month.
Yeah.
It would be great to have you join us, maybe even do a presentation of your own at some point. And just share some new ideas. But meanwhile, I think we're down to the discussion portion of the evening, such as is left.
Okay.
Do you have any final questions, comments, or anything like that? Sure.
No, nothing comes to my mind, but I would like to thank you for that very, very good presentation and very interesting presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. So, meanwhile, what are you working on lately? Just apropos of nothing. What are you working on lately?
FileMaker at this time I'm doing something else, but I would like to concentrate on FileMaker at some point in time.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
because it's in practicing you learn. So it's the only way to learn.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so many FileMaker developers started out by just doing.
Yeah.
So many FileMaker developers, myself included, started with little or no programming background. I started with a business problem, and at the time this was one of the few pieces of software available, so I jumped into it, But yeah, there's so much you can do with it. I mean, it's a black hole. You start to get in and you find more and more and more things, like you said, only limited by your imagination.
The deeper you go, and you just can't see the bottom of the hole. Yeah, it's really a rich system, FileMaker.
Right. And so much you can do. So much you can do.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think we're going to wind it up then, if that's okay with you. I really appreciate you joining. I hope you'll join us next month as well. And feel free to shoot us, emails, comments, or, like I said, volunteer for a Preza. We'd love to hear, let everybody offer. So,
Okay. Thank you again. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right, ending recording. Ready?